So we're going to talk a little bit now about what we're going to be going over in the next chapter. One of the things you're going to be looking at as far as looking at resistors. Let me come back up. So the major thing about any system you're going to be dealing with, it is very rarely, if ever, you're going to come across a one resistor circuit. Okay? There's three ways that we configure a circuit. You have the series circuit, which is what we're going to be getting into shortly. You have the parallel circuit, which is going to be the next chapter we go over. That will be test 2's material. And then lastly, we'll be going over series parallel. Now, series circuits, the closest analogy that we still really use in today's world is typically found in Christmas tree light strings, or Christmas lights strings, where they have light bulbs one after the other. What is the major vulnerability of that? What is the major issue we have with Christmas tree lights? One of them goes, what happens to the rest of the string? It's all gone, right? And is it really generally worth going through every single ever-loving light bulb to find the one that's toast? No, generally these things are about $5, so most of us tend to chuck them and go do something else. They can last for several years, yes, but when one light bulb goes, it just kind of becomes do I really and truly feel like I want to go through 500 lights to find the one bulb that toasted itself? Generally, most of us say, nah, not really. The next one we have are what's called a parallel circuit. Now, a parallel circuit is probably one of the most common circuits in today's world. It's how lights are wired. It's how, put it this way, it's basically how your whole house and every building you ever step into is wired. Now, what is the major vulnerability of something like this? Mm-hmm. The major vulnerability of a parallel circuit is if you get a short in one of these, that is a short circuit, which means you fry out everything that's part of that circuit. That's parallel circuits. Let's put it this way, if one of these lights shorted out, no, that one is going to short out, but it's going to cause some major damage on the lines. Basically, it's like you put a shortcut. Well, how many of you ever drove downtown when they were doing all the work on the bridges and crap? What happened to the roads that they made you take as a cut around those road constructions? What happened to the roads? They went from fairly decent roads to what? Potholes, everything just cracked and broken because the roads got overused, especially by vehicles that were too heavy, right? That was one of the biggest problems, is that you got things like dump trucks coming through there with heavier loads, and it just breaks up the asphalt. Same kind of situation. You create a shortcut that goes faster, and what happens to the roads? They break down. That's what happens with a short circuit. So then we've come up with what's called the series parallel circuit. Now the series parallel in certain ways can carry both the vulnerability and the strength of the others. Okay? If you have an open circuit, if you have an open in series, that's an open circuit, which means nothing's going to work. If you have an open and a parallel, let's say a light bulb goes out. Does that take down the whole circuit? Nah, opens are fine. If you get instead, let's say a short circuit in series, the rest of the loads typically are able to pick up what that guy's dropping. In other words, they're all team players. If one team member ends up shorted out, they're flat on the ground, can't work, can't do anything, the rest of the team picks them up and keeps going out the field. Does that make sense? In other words, whatever voltage and current he was holding on to himself is now shared with the other resistors. So no one has excessive load. Open circuit means that no, there's not going to be any current flow. Closed circuit, you have flow. However, if you have a short in one of these, you're going to fry out part of your circuit. So that is the major vulnerability of parallel.
So how do you avoid it?
Series parallel. Because in series parallel, if you get shorts in anything, you don't have a direct path back to your voltage. You do not get a short circuit. If you get an open anywhere but on the main line, you get any of those, doesn't affect it much. Everything else is able to pick up what's left over. So this is a lot less vulnerable to opens and shorts than these guys are. That's why a lot of circuits tend to be series parallel. It's not as common as it should be. Now, we'll get into more in depth about a lot of this because this is the chapter we're going to be going over here in a minute, series. This is going to be the next one we go over in parallel. That one's the last one we're going over before your final and test 3. Series circuits are the very basic circuits. Y'all have actually kind of dealt with them before. If you remember the first couple of labs y'all did, they dealt with multiple resistors, right? Those were dealing with a lot of series circuits. So, just kind of going ahead and talking about series circuits. One of the things you have to do is always make sure when you're dealing with a manual ranging meter, set it ahead of what you expect to find because you can always dial it back. If you're checking resistors, you should always disconnect your power source. And since most circuits are not strictly resistors, if you have capacitors at all, you need to drain those capacitors out or you're going to really have problems. Yes? ETC 101? DC fundamentals? This is only day 2. And I do have all my classes recorded, and there is a link to it, my YouTube channel on Blackboard, so you can go back and listen to the lectures previously. Not to mention, I also leave all my other lectures out there perpetually, so if you actually want to get ahead, you can go listen to those lectures. But do understand that any and all lectures are live recordings from in class, so you might hear me responding to somebody. And I try and repeat the question sometimes. Sometimes I don't remember to do so. All right, so bad conditions. So there's two different ways resistors have problems. One is that you get a short. Shorts are generally not a good thing. Or you have an open. Now, the best thing I can kind of tell you about a short versus an open. A short is exactly what it sounds like. It's almost like a shortcut. So what that means is that, how to say this? I know. Okay, so if you have a route between here and your house, okay, each resistor is a different speed zone. Does that make sense so far? Each resistor is a speed zone. Now, let's say one of those speed zones drops the speed entirely. You can go whatever speed you want to down there. Heck, if you hit 100, you get a bonus. 160, let's go. That would be the point of a short. A short is basically where you have no resistance whatsoever anymore. If you think of it like a river system that we have in today's world, we put dams on rivers just about every couple miles or so some places, right? So what if one of those dams was to burst? There is no resistance holding the river back in that one place. That is a short. Does that make sense? An open is an animal of a different color. Okay? An open is basically the circuit is broken. If any of you have ever kind of looked at the bridges that in order to allow traffic into a river, they open up. Okay? Y'all know what I'm talking about? With these particular bridges, if you look at the traffic on either side, if the bridge is open, where is the traffic that would normally be going across that bridge? It's on either side of the bridge, right? It can't move. It's stuck there until what? Until the bridge closes. Once that bridge closes, then traffic can resume its normal pattern. So the best way to remember, those are just kind of a couple analogies I like to use just because it's a more realistic way of looking at things than saying exactly what I'm about to say and hoping that y'all understand what I'm talking about. And that's that for open resistors, basically you can say anytime you have an open in any circuit, that is an excess of resistance. Does that make sense? If you have an open, you have excessive resistance. So if all of my circuit is balanced to be 1 kiloohm, but I get an open, I will not read 1 kiloohm. I'll read a lot more than that. Why? Because the resistance has become excessive and there is no ability for current to flow. Because the way a meter checks a resistor, your meter has a voltage source in a battery. So in order to check a resistor, what do you think it does? It lets the voltage push current through that resistor and then gets the reading out the other side. Does that make sense? That is quite literally how your meter works. If you're checking for voltage, guess what it's running it through? It's running it through an internal resistor. That internal resistor is not very big, And if you are reading current, you're running it through that resistor, but you're also running it through a fuse that is not very strong. That's why people typically blow their meters, is because the fuse is not the best. But you also don't want your meter frying out in your hand and blowing up in your face. So, opens read excessive resistance, shorts read none or little resistance. Okay? That's the rule to keep in mind. Opens read excessive resistance, shorts read very little, little to none. Okay? There are times where it will read 0, and there are times where it could read just like very, very little. Now, here's the funny thing about meters, and I'm glad you brought that up. They have a hard time reading this resistance sometimes. So just because it might say 0 resistance, if you've got a resistor that is literally like 500 milliamps or 500 milliohms, it might not be able to pick that up. Okay? Depends on settings, and it depends on the meter and how well and how it's put together. Because if it's a really, really cheap meter, it might not read as accurately as other meters. We won't even talk about some of the more expensive ones because meters can cost very much. But your typical meter can read it to a certain level. Resistance is read as resistance. It doesn't matter if it's DC or AC that you're going to be putting through it. Resistors are resistors. They don't care what you put through them. Kind of like a river dam does not care if you've got muddy water or clear water coming over it. It's just got water coming over it. What does it care if it's muddy, clear, or full of all sorts of nasty things that we don't want in our water system? They don't care. All right. So one of the things we will be talking about in series circuits are what are called voltage drops. Voltage drops. So we did not see, we saw some of it in intro, but this all goes back to the main formula of Ohm's law, which is what? V equals I times R. Well, I'm trying to think about how to say this. Series circuits affects voltage. Does that make sense? We'll get more into it here in a few minutes when we switch over to that. So current flowing through resistance will cause a decrease in voltage on the output side of the resistor. If you have a single resistor, you don't see this very much because the voltage that goes in is the voltage that comes out. There is no breakdown. But when you have multiple resistors in series, that's when you see this a lot. Okay? That is why you end up with voltage drops. Okay? All right, so we've got 2 slides I'm going to do real quick, and then we'll go ahead and move on to series circuits, where we'll probably be repeating some of this again here in just a minute. But so in a circuit with only one resistor, it's just like what I said, all your applied voltage is on that one resistor. That's why you have to size it properly to the voltage you're expecting and the current that will run. Every time you have more resistors, though, each one's going to have its own voltage drop. So think of it like a train. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Every time you add another train car to a train, what happens? It gets heavier. You have more load, right? So it takes more for that engine to move everything. But if you only have that one engine, each load you add takes more of the power away from that engine, right? Same thing. Okay. All right, so, and there's the key terms for this particular run. Will anybody take a picture that wants it? And then we'll go ahead and move on to series circuits. I said, I'm just trying to get through this review real quick. All right, and we'll go ahead and move on to the next chapter. Which is series circuits. Okay? So all circuits fall into one of these 3 categories. You have series, parallel, or series parallel. Or you parallel series, however you want to call it. So a series is literally like a train. The first and last resistors are the only ones connected to your voltage source, and each will drop voltage. I'll go ahead and tell you a secret right now, or further information right now. This is a circuit that is called the voltage divider. There's a reason it's called that. Okay? Because every time you add that next resistor in, what's it probably going to do? It's going to divide the voltage off of everybody else again. Yeah. That whole circuit divides voltage. So what use is something like a voltage divider? Well, how much voltage do we typically run on a circuit in the house or in any place of business? It's about 120, right? Now, what do electronics run on? What do most electronics run on? Like your computer. What do we use to charge your computer? About 12 to 24 volts, yes. Now, inside this little black box connected to your computers is a circuit. This one's really nicely hot. But what's inside this circuit transfers the voltage from AC to DC. However, first, you got to break that voltage down because you do not want 120 volts moving into the computer. What would happen if it did? You'd fry it. Very delicate electronics, yes? Yes. You have transformers that help step down the voltage, but you also can have a I'm all good. Ankle rolled. No, I'm good. It's just my ankle rolled. It does that periodically. All of a sudden, I'll take a step and it tries to roll out from under me. Nope. just me being a klutz. Sorry. So what this circuit does is it divides voltage. There's only one path for current to flow, and the current is the same throughout the circuit. So put it in perspective. Looking at a train. And I mean the train like runs on a track, not whatever else. There's a lot of different uses for the word train. The one I'm talking about are choo-choo trains that run on tracks. So, going back to that analogy, every car you add to this train, what does it do to the voltage, the push of moving that train? It drops it, right? Every car that you add, is it going to be the same weight as the other cars? No, you might have one that's empty, one that's completely full of something really heavy. You might have whole bowling balls that you could possibly want for a bowling alley. Huh? And then you might have one that's nothing but feather pillows. Every one's going to have a different weight. Every resistor is not going to be the same in these circuits. But what it's going to do is every one that you add, whatever the weight, is going to pull the push of that engine moving forward. It's going to pull that push ability back. Each one's going to take its own set of that push to move everything forward. Does that make sense? But once everything's moving forward, everything's going to move forward at the same speed. Yeah? Because the train's pushing everything forward. So that's what, so the push, and so the overall speed of the train is your current. The push from the locomotive is your voltage. And each of the cars are your resistors. Question? Yes, all circuits, if they are engaged, they're a closed path. Open paths would be, if I have a switch right here, that would signal for an open circuit, just the open path. If you break a circuit's path, it cannot move anything. So think about a railroad. If you have a break in the railroad, can the train move forward? No. All your voltage gets stuck on one side. You can't really move the current because, voltage push means you have current speed. Doesn't matter what the resistance is at that point. You're just going to have everything stuck on the track. However, when you close that circuit off, when you complete that track, everything moves like it should. That make sense? So here's a good drawing of a series circuit. So you have 4 loads on this particular one. You have your voltage source. And again, you have one path for current to flow. It cannot change paths. It cannot get away from itself. It's just one straight road. Okay? So parallel circuits, just to go ahead and introduce this. This is, so it's parallel. And we've already talked about this a little bit. Each of these lights, what do they run on? The lights overhead, what is the voltage if I was to put my meter across them? It's 120. Every single one takes 120 throughout this whole room. Okay? That is what a parallel circuit does. Is this dividing voltage? No, they all have the same voltage. The same voltage runs throughout. It's parallel in that case. So the voltage that you apply is on every part of the circuit, across every resistor. Okay? All the loads are connected back to that voltage source. You can kind of see that here on the drawing. The current is distributed in the circuit inversely proportional to the branch resistance. In other words, have any of you, well, good way to say it. Have any of you ever seen what the Mississippi Delta looks like? Once you get down at the end of the Mississippi River, what happens? You have several branches that the water goes down, right? Now, what determines the current on each branch? It's going to be the width of the opening, right? How big and how much resistance is in each place where that river is trying to move down? Parallel circuits work exactly the same. If you have a really, really big opening or a really, really big small resistance, I'm not going to get totally into that. But, yeah. Mm-hmm. The Gulf does not feed the river. The river feeds the Gulf. The river feeds it. Yeah. The Mississippi River starts somewhere up, I think, in Minnesota. Way up, it's way up there. Wisconsin, somewhere up there. Look it up. Seriously, Google it. It is. It doesn't go down to Gulf Shores, not really. What you're talking about for the Mississippi Delta, that goes down to the Louisiana, Mississippi area. That's where you get the Gulf. That's where you get the Mississippi Delta. The Mississippi Delta. This is totally off topic, but so the Mississippi. Where you have the Mississippi Delta, I think what you're thinking of is the fact that you have salt water mixing with fresh water. The fresh water is from the river itself. The salt water is coming up from the ocean itself. And that's where that mixes, and it becomes a very salty marsh. And that salt marsh is where you get a lot of animals, and it's actually where you see nurseries for a lot of sea creatures. And it's also where you get the mangrove swamps and stuff like that. That's why Louisiana and Mississippi are so swampy, especially at their borders, because they have nothing but swampland right there. Especially the closer you get to the Gulf of Mexico, between Louisiana and Mississippi, that's where you're going to get the most swampy, marshy, mangrove, cypress, all that. That's where all that is. Mosquito land, thank you. But yeah, Mississippi River, I want to say it starts Michigan, maybe?
Yeah, it says
Minnesota. That sounds about right. There's a lot of rivers that feed into the Mississippi. The Mississippi is the biggest river in the U.S. It literally takes, before or right at around the time of the Civil War, whenever we did the Louisiana Purchase and all that, the Mississippi River was the border between what was America and what was not. Now, you did have a few settlements that moved further west. You did have different purchases that bought up that land. But it was a very slow process in the settling of that land. If you want to read more about that, that's all history. I'm not a history teacher. But yeah, the Mississippi River was the barrier between what was America and what was not. Then you got the major Louisiana Purchase, and we supposedly got a lot of land there, and it is what it is. But back to topic. So if you ever kind of get down there, and what you would see is that the Mississippi River is one big branch, and then it gets all these little branches out here that are all headed for that Gulf of Mexico, where it's going to mix everything together from there. Now, what's going to happen is that the more resistance in a specific branch, the less current. Why? Because water likes to take the path of least what? Least resistance. You see this all the time in homes where if you have a leak, it's a lot harder to determine where a water leak is, right? If any of you've ever been a homeowner, if you ever talked to people that have had this problem, it's very hard to determine where a leak is whenever it initially starts. Why? Because water takes the path of least resistance. It doesn't just immediately drip down from where it comes in. It likes to kind of hang out and follow different trails and stuff and create its own path. And then it will drop out of nowhere. It's why finding leaks in anything is probably the biggest pain in the rear that you come across as a homeowner. But electricity is the same way. Anything that has any form of push or needs a path. Put it to you this way. Would you rather have the path of least resistance or the path of greater resistance? I don't think there's anything in nature that wants to take the path of more resistance. We all like to go the easy way, right? We all at some point like the easy way over the hard way. Why? Because it's easy. A lot of us make the hard roads every now and then. But if the easy road's that much easier, sometimes it's a little more tempting. All right, so there's your parallel circuit. This one again has 4 loads and a voltage source. So what you can tell is that each voltage load. I can't talk. One of those things, if sometimes my brain and my mouth try to get into disconnection here. So what you can see from this picture is your voltage is quite literally connected to each load. Now each load, the size of that resistor will determine how much current goes down. If you have a very, very small resistor, that's going to pull the most current. If you have a very, very large value resistor, it's going to pull the least. You get everything else that's going to fall in between. Does that make sense? All right. And then series parallel. Some of the loads are in parallel, some are in series. That's quite literally what this is. Okay? The whole circuit is quite literally what it says. Okay? Everybody good? So in this case, you can see we start off with our voltage source going directly to 2 different load sets. From there, you have one set of series and you have a second set of series. Okay? So what's going to happen with this is that you have an initial voltage with an initial current. What's going to happen whenever it breaks off into these two branches, your current will split according to what these loads are. Does that make sense so far? From there, you split your voltages into these two. And you split your voltage, your source voltage, into each pair of resistors. Where everything joins back up at the bottom and goes back to source. There's literally a million different ways you can do series parallel. The whole point of it is that you're not only breaking down the voltage, but you're breaking down what? You're breaking down your voltage and you're breaking down your current. Does that make sense? That is the whole purpose of series parallel. Break your voltage, break your current. All right. So topics: resistors in series, current in series, total series resistance, Ohm's law, voltage sources. We have what's called Kirchhoff's voltage law. We have voltage divider formula, power in series, and troubleshooting. So resistors in series, it literally forms a string. Again, the best example I can tell you is a string of Christmas tree lights. Right? You have a full string of Christmas tree lights. That is exactly what a series circuit is. So these days, you are starting to see more and more of these strings where if one bulb goes out, does it take out the whole string? No, it might take out a section of it. At which point, you, the person that's actually having to deal with the string, you gonna throw that away, or if it's like a strict piece where it's what, 20 lights, you're more likely to do what? Replace the bulb. It's not as hard to find one bulb in a string of 20 versus one bulb in a string of 500. They are starting to put them in series parallel. And there is only one path for current to flow with this, guys.
That's what I'm saying.
That is series. We're strictly talking series right now. Everything else will come later. Everybody good? Any notes you want on this? You guys do remember I have the PowerPoints online, so you do not have to write verbatim. You really do. Anyway, so resistors in series, they literally form a string. They run one after each other, just like a train with a bunch of cars behind it, right? Doesn't matter how many you add, you can just always add more. That's how you get from a string of maybe 1 or 2 lights to a string of 500 lights. Or what's the largest string of Christmas lights? Like 1,000? I don't think they've gone up to 1 billion yet. That would be a very, very long string. I would be interested to see exactly how much voltage that takes. That would take a lot of voltage. You'd actually have to have a transformer to step the voltage up enough that would actually be able to distribute enough voltage down that string to light everything. Yeah. Sorry, mental problems and mathematics. So these are some examples of series connections. What you're looking for when you're looking to see if something is a series circuit is for each resistor to be connected in a single line. What you're looking to not see is that each of these are connected at both ends to the resistor next to it. Does that make sense? Don't want both ends connected to the resistor next to it. That's parallel. Series is literally just like a string. You can follow it like a single long string. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So if I was to connect each of these, what should it look like? I can literally connect it however I want to, right? I can connect it very simply, or not so simply. However I want to, right? What is the whole thing I'm looking for with these is to connect them all in what? In a single string, right? I connect these in about 5 different ways each. Right? Always depending on how you want to connect it up. Sorry. So current in series. Current in series does not change. Okay? I'll even go so far as say current is constant in series. Current will not change no matter where in the series circuit you are. Okay? So current flowing through each resistor is the same. It's just like we were talking about with the train. Once that engine takes off, every single car that follows it goes at the same speed as the ones in front of it and the ones behind it. Right? And all that speed is determined by what? By your voltage, or your, in this case, you have a train that's going to be full, and by your resistance, or the weight of the cars connected, right? Does that make sense? One day I'm going to have to talk to somebody who's a conductor on one of those things and figure out why there are some times where you see all these trains where you have one connected to the back end of the other, connected to the front end of another. You know what I'm talking about? The engines they do that with the engines, and I just always sit there and go, is that for that, or is that for just we're trying to get to another place? That'd be an interesting question to ask a conductor one day. Why exactly do you all take those engines and connect them head to tail or tail to head? What is the purpose of that? Sorry, off topic. No, current. The only thing that's going to be the same throughout the whole circuit will be the current. Now, that's not to say current of one circuit is going to be the same as the current of another. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the current in a singular circuit is the same throughout that whole singular circuit. Does that make sense? I wanted to clarify that because I know there are some people that have had questions on that before. I'm about to have to turn off that heater. Anybody else getting a little toasty in here? You're cold? Might be because I'm up here pacing. All right. The more you move, the warmer you get. Yeah, it is. You can't hear that running?
I know, like the fan's on.
Mm-hmm. That is our heater. That's why it was probably very cold this morning. All right, so current is the same at all points in a series circuit. I don't care what the resistance is. For each resistor, what I'm saying is your current is not going to change. Like I said, just like a train. Once that engine takes off, the speed it goes is the speed it goes, right? Hmm? No, voltage is your engine. Resistor is all the cars you strap to the back of it. Hmm. But just like if you put more engines on one than you do on another, your voltage and your resistance are going to determine your current. But once you determine that current, the current is not going to change throughout the whole circuit. Okay? There is only one path. Okay? There is only one path. So the good thing about resistance in a series circuit is that your resistance adds. You saw this in intro when we did experiment, I think it was number 2, whereby you made a circuit with 3 resistors and your voltage source. What you should have seen was that your resistance adds to create a total resistance. Okay? And as for the formula here, guys, what it's saying is that resistance total equals adding up your individual resistors. Now, the total number of resistors is only determined by what? How many resistors are you going to put in, right? Again, we have strings of like 1,000 Christmas tree lights on one string. That means that at any one point, each one is a resistor. So if you're trying to do a formulaic, if you're trying to add each resistor, you're going to be adding a lot of resistors. So a lot of people ask me what Rn stands for. Basically, it's R of X. How many resistors are you putting on this particular string of series resistors? Does that make sense? So if the following resistors are connected in series, what is the total resistance? So we have 56, 100, 27, 10, and 47. What does that equal out to?
199. Oh, I didn't see the 10 to 47.
56, 10, 27, 47, and 100. Should be 240, yeah? Huh? It doesn't matter. You're just adding the values.
So the value is there. Okay, yeah.
Okay? I mean, yeah. This doesn't, I won't say the formula doesn't matter. I will say, simplest way to think of it is just take every number that you're given as a resistance number and add it. The only thing you might do to subtract would be if you have the total resistance and you're looking for an individual resistor, but you have all the other values. So you would subtract. So you would take all your resistance values that are not the total, add those up, and subtract from the total to find that individual resistor. Does that make sense? So think of it like not so much a circuit, you can also think of it like, how many of you go shopping every week? You know, grocery shopping. What do you mentally do as you're putting things in your cart?
I think about the next thing. No, scratching it off.
Huh?
Scratching it off.
What now? Adding up your total. You're not trying to be completely exact, but in your mind, you're generally going, oh, that's $4. Oh, that's $3. Oh, that's $10. Oh, that's $5. And you're mentally keeping that running total. And mentally, you're also going cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. Ah!
You say you don't care about the total. You big money. How much is in the cart? Throw it out. Miss, I need the whole aisle.
Yeah, no, I don't think most people think that way. I think most of us are frugal enough that are in our heads, we're sitting there going, okay, that's $5, that's $10, that's so cool. Okay, well, I've got $15 in the cart so far. All right, let's add another $5 item. Let's add another $6 item. And we're mentally keeping that running total. And then when you get to the register and you've completely checked out and you look at your receipt, mentally also start going, okay, so that doesn't look like what I had in my head, so I'm either missing an item or I need to take an item away. Yeah. Sorry, that's just the way my brain works. I don't know about y'all. I will say this, I do keep a list when I go grocery shopping. I don't go off the list very much. So for equal value resistors, so if I know the resistance value of that one light bulb in a Christmas tree light string, I can find my total resistance by multiplying it times the number of bulbs. So if I have one light bulb that's worth 50 ohms, and it's a 500 watts or a 500 bulb string, what would that give me? All I would literally do is 50 times 500.
Austin said 25,000.
Yep.
I think it's 2,500.
Should be 2,500, right? Or is it 25,000? Which one is it?
Honestly, I think if
So all I'm doing is quick math up here, huh? Is 25,000? So we do have an extra zero. All right. So you would end up with 25 kiloohms as your total resistance in your string. Huh? No. That's only if all your resistor values are equal. You multiply them. That's just a quick little shortcut. But that only works if they are all equal. Okay? If it has any variation in there, it will not work out to be what it should be. But if they are all equal, I can multiply them out, be done with them. But the likelihood of, well, I'm not going to say that. Because in reality, we generally don't use a lot of series circuits for much anymore. Why? Because they can cause their own set of problems. If you have one go out, a lot of times it's not worth trying to find out which one went. So. All right, so here we are. We've already calculated our RT. It's what? 240. It's 240 ohms. Okay. already calculated the RT for this. All right, so, and just as an example of if your resistors are all the same value, okay, then you can multiply them to get your total resistance. So if I add two 10 ohm resistors, that's 20. If I add three, that's 30, and so on and so forth. And that, no matter how many I add, I can multiply them out and get my total resistance. As long as they're the same. If one of these was a 20 ohm resistor, you'd have to add that in. Okay? Now, let me make myself very, very clear on this. That is Ohm's law, as well as Watts' law. Now, I would love for that compressor to stop at any point in time. I think it's very loud. I want y'all to write this down. I want it in big capital letters, whatever you got to do, because I want this permanently ingrained in your brain. Okay? The way we will use Ohm's law and Watt's law might change per individual resistor. However, neither one changes the way they work. Okay? Voltage will always equal current times resistance. Period. Okay? If you're looking to find current, you would do that dividing voltage by resistance. And if you are trying to find your resistance, you would divide your current times your voltage by your current. Your Ohm's law does not change. There's a reason I'm being very empathetic about this, and it's not just for series circuits. It's for parallel. Ohm's law, based upon the individual resistor, or even the circuit as a whole, still applies. Okay? And the same goes for Watt's law. We are not changing a fundamental law of electricity. The way we are applying it and having to work with it, that is the only thing that's really changing. Does that make sense? Because you would not believe how many people. There's a reason I'm trying to tell y'all this now, because it tends, for some reason, this confuses a lot of people. But this is a fundamental law. It will not change. I don't know how else to say it, guys. It is a fundamental law. It will not change. So if I'm looking at this, I don't care if I'm looking for since current is constant, anytime I find current anywhere, what should I do immediately to all other parts of the circuit? Apply the same current, right? Current is constant. It will not change. No matter what part of the circuit you're in. 10 amps is still going to be 10 amps no matter where you find it in the circuit. If you find it at one resistor, it's going to apply to all the others. Okay? Go ahead and put that out there. I'm going to go ahead and erase the board a little bit, give myself some space here. Voltage in a series circuit does divide. However, once I find current times resistance is voltage. Now my voltage will ultimately add for each resistor to my total voltage. Y'all following me so far? But I can still find individual voltages or total voltage by finding what parts I need. If I'm looking for voltage total, I will multiply my current times my resistance total. Like I said, Ohm's law has not changed. There is no mystic mumbo jumbo that makes any of this change. If I'm looking for a specific voltage in a specific resistor, I will multiply my current times that resistor value. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Resistor number. That's all that's representing. R of N is just representing a resistor number. Because again, you can have like 5 resistors on this kind of a circuit, or you can have 1,000 volt resistors on a circuit. All that's representing is what resistor of whatever number you're dealing with. Voltage of that particular resistor. So resistor number 359. Now, it's true. So resistance in a series circuit, resistance total can be found by dividing your voltage total by your current. If you're looking for the resistance of a specific resistor, you can divide the voltage of that resistor by the current. Ohm's law has not changed, gentlemen. A lot of people seem to want to change Ohm's law, but Ohm's law has not changed. It is still the same law it was 5 minutes ago when I introduced this subject. Okay? So what is Ohm's law? It is literally your voltage is equal to your current times your resistance. That has not changed. I don't care what kind of circuit you've got it in. If it's series, parallel, or series parallel, Ohm's law and Watts' law do not change. They are the fundamental laws of electricity. Okay? All right, and I don't know what they kind of want you to do with this, but I'm going to go ahead and go for something a little different. So, first of all, I've got my individual resistors. So if I was to give you, let's say, we'll say 20 milliamps to go with this particular circuit. Okay? I'm going to show you probably the easiest way that you can solve these kind of problems. I'm going to make this go away too. This is why you want pencils and paper in my class. Because what I'm about to show y'all works pretty well. All right. All right. So once you've drawn up a chart, yes, I know it's a pain to draw it up. But believe it or not, this is probably one of the easiest ways to work with these kind of problems. The series and the parallel circuits, this is the best way I know of to organize all your information without confusion. Does that make sense? If you want to take it to where the R's are on top and you do VIR, P down your side, that's up to you. But you want to put it in a chart to organize your information in a way that you can help yourself. Because once you've done this, and you filled in the information you already know, your resistance values and your current value, you start applying the knowledge that you already know. So what do I know about current? What is it's 20 milliamps. But where does it apply to? Strictly to total, or does it apply to my whole circuit? So what can I do? I can start filling out my chart. I just take that 20 milliamps, put it all the way through. That applies to all of my circuit. So thus, I apply it to all of the circuit. Y'all following? All right. I don't know my voltage total yet. I don't know any of my individual voltages. Can I find my resistance total? How do I do that?
What you gotta do is you're gonna add 3,000.
Go ahead. You add them all up. All right, so I've got 2K and 3K. That's going to give me 5 kilo ohms. Then I have 800, 200, and 500. That's going to give me 1.5 kilo ohms. So my resistance total should be 6.5 kilo ohms. Correct?
Correct.
Everybody follow what I did? No, to get your resistance total, you add all your resistance. But what I can do from here is find my voltage total. How am I going to do that?
You're gonna multiply intensity and resistance.
Not intensity, that's current. I'm going to multiply my current times my resistance, yes. All right, so what is 20 milliamps? That's 0.02 multiplied by 6.5 kilo. Huh? 130 volts. Okay. So once I've found my voltage total, what can I find? Well, I've got current and I've got resistance. I can just go ahead and go down the list, right? So what is my voltage at resistor 1?
Your voltage at resistor is 130. 60.
60. What about at R2? 10. R3?
16.
R4? And R5? 40. So I've got 60 volts, 10 volts, 16, 4, and 40. Now, how can I check my answers? You add them up and you see if they equal to your total resistance. Everybody following me so far? So I can literally add 60 plus 40, that would give me 100. And then I've got 16 plus 4, that's 20, so you're at 120. Add 10, you're at 130. I think we've got our whole voltage distributed. You're multiplying your current times your resistance total. Mhm. If you ever find your current in series circuits, you are golden to find everything else. Great thing about it. Hmm? Now the last thing we need to find is the power each one of these is consuming. So what does Watts' law state?
That power equals resistance times, well, this voltage. I have it right here. It's voltage.
So our formula is power is equal to voltage times current. So I've already got my current, I've got my voltage. All I've got to do is what? Start playing with multiples, right? So 130 times 0.02 gives me what? Mega? Is 2.6 watts. Yep. 130 times 0.02. That's why when you were saying megawatts, it kind of was throwing me off here.
Basically, I got completely confused when I heard somebody say voltage times resistance.
No, not voltage times resistance. Voltage times current. Voltage times current.
That's
1.2 is our R2, R1, R2.
Yep, no, the R2 is 0.02.
200 milliwatts. 10 times 0.02. Should be 0.2. Huh? Are you talking about the next one? Yep, it is 320 milliwatts. When we go down to 4 volts, that would be 80 milliwatts. And then we go down to 40 at 800 milliwatts. Believe it or not, while the chart does take a little bit more work to set up, guys, I have yet to find anything that makes it faster and easier to actually solve these problems. And it's more organized. Whenever you've got, well, let's just put it this way. When you find out where your missing values are by putting them in a chart like this, it makes it much faster and easier to solve out for those particular parts. And I'll show you a few examples as we go along tonight. All right? But, huh? Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to have a guy named, I can't pronounce his first name, but a gentleman named Kirchhoff. He came up with several laws for electricity. When it comes to series circuits, Kirchhoff's voltage law states that voltage will add. Okay? It means that all voltage can add and that all voltage will be dropped in a circuit. Okay? So the sum of the individual voltage drops equal total applied voltage. However you want to say it, it's all the same. Voltage will add to total. Your total voltage will be found in your circuit. Okay? And power in series is that power adds as well. And here's the funny thing. I'll go ahead and put this out there. Power always adds. Power never subtracts, never divides, does not really multiply. It just always adds. That is in and of itself the truth of the world. Power always adds. All right? So if I have 225 milliwatts, 270 milliwatts, 1.26 watts, and 495 milliwatts, what does that give me for a power total? So what is my power total? I'm going to double check your numbers. 2.25. Now, why is it 2.25? Well, because that right there, I'm sorry that's such a really bad circle. That right there is not milli. That is watts. That is 1.26 watts, not milliwatts. Goes back to that, you gotta make sure you don't, what notation you in and what you're doing with it. So you should have had 2.25 watts. Okay, everybody good with this? I'm trying to do all the tracing with a mouse, so please excuse the bad writing. All right. All right, so here's your first circuit that you can kind of work with. I'm going to set everything up here, and I'll go ahead and kind of get ahead of me real quick. Three. Okay. 1.2. All right, let's myself up here. All right, so everybody should be setting up your chart, right? Very first thing you do is put in what you know. Bless you.
That first one.
Yes. And no, I'm not putting my ohm symbols on here. Yes, you probably should do so as the practice of it. The reason I'm not is because A, I run very short on space when I do, and B, nice quick. But these are 1 kilo ohm, 1.2 kilo ohm, and 1.8 kilo ohm. And that is 120 volts. Trying to do all this make sure I do this the right way for y'all. All right. So everybody should be set up, right? So what's the first thing I can find with my knowledge? My resistance total. My resistance total is 4 kilo ohms. I do that by adding 1.2, 1.8, and 1 kilo ohm all together. Should give me 4 kilo ohms. Right? So once I have that, what can I find? Well, let's look at our columns. Where do I have a run of columns with 2 bits of information in them? My totals, right? I've got my resistance total and my voltage total, so I can find my current total. So what is my current total in this case? 30 milliamps. All right, and what do I do with that 30 milliamps? Apply it to all. It applies to all parts of this circuit. Okay? Current times resistance will give me my other voltages. So what is my voltage for R1?
30.
Should be 30 volts. What'll be my voltage for R2?
36.
36 volts. And R3? 54 volts. So if I add 36, 54, and 30, do I get 120? Just as a quick way to check my work. If I add 54 to 36, that should give me 90 plus 30 is 120. Always check yourself, guys. Very quick and easy ways to do it. And that way you can double check your answers are not getting off somewhere. All right. Lastly, I need to find power. Current and voltage will give me power. What is my power total? Should be, what, 360? What? What is my current? What is my power total? I don't have my calculator.
Oh, your power total. Oh, I got you.
It's 3.6 watts.
I was getting R1 and R2. So I'm thinking, what's the total?
All right, so what is R1?
0.09. No, 0.9.
Should be 900 milliwatts. What's R2?
36.
36 times 30 milli. So 36 volts times 0.03, guys. No, not watt, milliwatts. 1.08 watts. Yes. And lastly, your watt power at R3 should be 1.62 watts. Any questions, guys? Thirty volts times 0.03, or 30 volts times 30 milli. 36 times 30 milli. Power formula. V times I. The voltage wasn't enough to push it to a watt. I don't know what else to tell you. Just mathematics. Okay, everybody good? Any questions, guys? All right, everybody good? We're going to move on. There's all your answers. So let's check it. Resistance total, 4 kiloohms. Current total, 30 milliamps. Because current is constant, we can bring it through our whole circuit. Voltage at R1 is 30. R2 is 36. R3 is 54. To check it, 30 plus 36 plus 54 is 120. Okay. Power in circuit 1, you have 900 milliwatts at R1, 1.08 watts at R2, and 1.62 watts at R3. Added up, that gives you 3.6 watts. Okay. There's several different variations of ways that you can calculate that. Everybody good? All right, so I'm going to let y'all get a head start on this circuit, and then we will talk about answers. guys, I'm going to give y'all just another minute to work on this, and then we'll go ahead and fill in the chart. Oh, while I'm thinking about it, I need to go ahead and do roll, don't I? Yep. All right, Blanchard, Cherry, Curry, Garcia, Golden, Cooley, Ouellette, Temple, Thomas, and Turner. All right. And that is roll. Okay. All right. So what's the first bit of information I can find here, guys? My resistance total is the first thing I should find. What is my resistance total? 3 kiloohms. All right. So what's the next thing I can find? My current. What's my current?
15
And what do I do with that? Put it all the way down. Then I can find my voltage. What is my voltage at R1?
10.2
R2?
12.3.
And R3?
22.5.
Okay. So real quick, what's a trend that we've got going here as far as our voltages? What resistor is pulling the most?
Last one. Oh, so the resistor that's pulling the most, yeah, no,
Mm-hmm. So which one is pulling the most voltage?
resistor 3.
It's not always going to be resistor 3.
Well, 1500 kilo.
The largest resistor pulls the most voltage. That is a hard and fast rule, guys. Your largest resistor should be pulling the most voltage. Does that make sense? Just like if you have a train, right? Which car is going to require the most push to get it moving? The heaviest, right? Of all the train cars, what's going to require the most to get it moving? It's going to be the largest, heaviest train car, right? What's going to take the least? Our smallest, right? In this case, it's our 680. Largest is our 1.5 kilo. So what about my power?
675 milliwatts.
675 milliwatts. Getting kind of hungry.
Second one's 153.
Sorry. All right, so R1 is what? 153 milliwatts. R2?
184.5.
Okay.
337
337
milliwatts.
milliwatts. Okay, well, if it's 337, we'll make one of them 33. We'll make that one 338, just to account for that half point each of the other ones are using. Okay.
So, the more the resistance is,
The more everything it's going to pull away. Yes. Yes. That's not megaamps, it's milliamps. It comes from your voltage divided by your resistance. In this case, the way we've been finding it is dividing our voltage total by our resistance total. Mm-mm. All right. What you have to remember, guys, is that when you're doing any of the adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, is that there are things that have meaning that go with this. And those 9 are it. You have tera, giga, mega, kilo, milli, micro, nano, pico. Those have meaning. And that is seriously what a lot of people tend to forget when they're adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with these numbers. Because when you're looking at resistance, you're adding 680, 820, and then you see the numbers 1.5. But you cannot forget what? You cannot forget that is not 1.5, that's 1.5 kilo. Meaning that you are not dealing with 1.5, you're dealing with 1,500 as your number. That is a very common mistake. It is probably one of the most prevalent mistakes. You cannot forget your powers of 10 are there, guys. By doing so, you're going to miss your whole circuit because those are vital. This is not 15, it's 15 milli. Milli meaning that you're not dealing with 15, you're dealing with the number 0.015. Okay? You'll really need to make sure you watch out for those because of anything that will trip you up with these numbers. Okay? Yep. All right, you're good. If y'all got any questions about these before we go ahead and go to the next couple slides? Nobody? All right, so resistance total, 680 plus 820 plus 1.5K did give us 3 kilos. When you divide 45 volts by 3 kilo ohms, it gives you 15 milli. R1, R2, and R3 gave us 10.2, 12.3, and 22.5 volts in and of themselves. Checking your work, you add 10.2, 12.3, and 22.5 together, you get 45 volts. To find power, you multiply your voltage times your current. So you get 153 milliwatts, 184.5, and 337.5 milliwatts for R1, R2, and R3. Your total should have been 675 milliwatts. There's a couple different ways to check that. Y'all got any questions on that? Everybody good? All right. I think I'm going to let y'all go completely on your own with this one, and then we'll come back and get the answers for circuit 3. All right. Give y'all a couple minutes to finish solving this, and then we'll put y'all up there and see what y'all think. Or y'all want me to just put up the answers in a minute? All right, we ready to do the answers, guys? All right. Y'all need another minute, or y'all want to go ahead and get the answers up? Everybody ready? All right. What's RT?
20 kiloohms.
All right. What about IT?
3 milliamps.
And power?
180 milliwatts.
All right. What is the voltage at R1?
9.9 volts.
9.9 volts. R2?
14.1 volts.
14.1 volts. And R3?
36.
Okay. And my powers?
29.7 milliwatts.
All right. R2?
42.3 milliwatts.
And R3?
108 milliwatts.
All right. Let's see if those match up. And they do. RT is 20 kiloohms. Current overall is 3 milliamps. Voltages are 9.9, 14.1, and 36 volts respectively. And then you got your powers of 29.7, 42.3, 108, and a total of 180. Yes and no. A lot of what we tend to work in are milli or micro. You don't really see in the circuits we do. We don't really get into nano or pico. You might come up to a total amp, but mostly we tend to seem to work in milli and micro with the circuits we calculate. I can't say it will always be that way, because it always just depends on the circuit you're working with. All of it always just depends on the numbers, because the numbers are what prove out everything. Does that make sense? So voltage in series. Voltage sources are energy sources that provide a constant voltage. When two or more batteries are connected in series, the total voltage is equal to the sum of the individual voltages. There's two ways we can add batteries together. So how many of y'all all have remotes at home? You all have flashlights at home. When you put batteries in a flashlight or a remote or even certain other electronics, there's two different ways. Well, there's mostly the way of top to bottom, right? That's where you get series aiding. So what you would see with this is you got the, and guys, I'm really sorry, I'm not an artist, so please bear with me on my bad drawings. So this is a frequent configuration of batteries, right? You got two or three that all are head to tail, right? That's a very common battery configuration. This means that the battery's voltages actually add up. What is the typical voltage of a basic cell battery? Let's say a D cell, AAA, AA. What is the voltage those put out? It's 1.5 volts. That 1.5 volts is not enough to power most electronics, right? So what do we need to do? We need to bring it up by adding more voltage. So if you get a big flashlight and you put a bunch of D cells in them, head to tail, every one you're adding is another 1.5 volts to run that flashlight. Does that make sense? Series opposing means that the batteries are either facing head to head or tail to tail. This is why whenever you put them in the wrong way, whatever you're trying to run does not work. Y'all know what I mean, right? You put the batteries in and go, why is this not working? This does not work. Why is this not working? Unscrew it, one battery's backwards. This would be why this does not work. Because what happens is they subtract from each other, basically neutralizing one of the batteries. And I know these look really weird, but hey, I'm trying to draw with a mouse on a computer screen. I think that gets me cookie points, right? Again, A for effort. So series aiding is the way we normally try and put flashlights in some of the bigger, some batteries in some of the bigger flashlights. Series opposing is what you don't want to do. But sometimes you actually do use it. So series aiding is exactly what it sounds like. You add your batteries up. In this particular case, with a 1 kilo ohm battery and 3 12-volt batteries, you end up with 36 volts total. Okay. So if these were 1.5 volt battery cells, you would end up with 4.5 volts, right? And then you have series opposing. By turning the middle battery or the middle cell the wrong way, we cancel out 2 of the cells that we put in. So instead of 36 volts, we end up with only 12 because 2 of them are fighting each other. Does that make sense? That actually works. Seriously, if you ever can get 3 cells bound together, you stick a voltmeter across them and you have one of them flip backwards. If the voltage is exactly equal, they will completely cancel each other out. That's why you have to make sure your batteries are turned the right way, because otherwise you have nothing. So these are some examples of series voltages. So looking at this particular problem, the first problem on the left, I'm going to go ahead and put a number over here. That's number 1. This one is number 2. So for number 1, are those series aiding or series opposing? So what you need to look for is on these signals, you have one long line versus a short line. If you have 2 long lines facing each other, that should be series what? It should be series opposing, because the long line is the positive line. So this one would have the 2 batteries sitting head to head. And then you have the little line, that's the negative side of the battery. Okay? So this particular one is set up series opposing. All right. This one is set series opposing because the long lines that represent the positives are facing each other. So what this is going to have is 25 and 15 would give me only 10 volts between the two. That would be my total voltage for this whole circuit. Does that make sense? And then if we look over here, are these series aiding or series opposing for number 2? These are aiding because the little line is the negative, the long line is the positive. So my total voltage here would be what? 75 volts. And just to kind of give you all a bit of a different example of this, let's see, where is it? This is a nice website if you kind of want to play with this without being in lab. This is a website put out by Colorado EDU. I think that's Colorado State, but I could be wrong. They put out this little simulator a while back. And it's actually kind of a really nice one because it comes with things like you can do your batteries, you can flip one around. So if I was to put this together, and it does this really fast and easy, you can actually see the flow of the electrons. What's better is I can also pull a voltmeter out. 1 voltmeter, lead to one side, and then 1 voltmeter to the other. And right now, each of these is set to 9 volts, which gives me a grand total of 18 volts. If I decide to cut those apart and add a series opposing battery, I should have got, if I had it turned the right way, another 9 volts added to this. Brought it up to 27. Instead, I've got my voltage dropped to 9 volts. Why? Because these two are series opposing. They're sitting back to back of each other. So series aiding, series opposing. Does that make sense?
So the negative part isn't necessarily.
The negative part is what now?
No, like this, the negative doesn't necessarily ground it. It's specifically.
I'm not quite sure what you're saying.
Because if the negatives are facing each other, then nothing will flow through. But you're saying that it still does ground through.
I can flip that one around too. I can put the two heads together and it still drops it to 9 volts. It's because the two batteries are not, how to say this? In other words, they're trying to go head to head with each other. So basically, it would be like two trains, both of them being facing each other or putting the backs of them to each other. And you turn them both on to where they're trying to push like a tug of war. You know, if you get in, have you ever been in a push fight where you have one person, your hands against another person's, and you each try and push each other over, right? You know what I'm saying? Y'all have all done this little whatever. So you and your buddy are trying to push against each other. You're of equal size and equal weight. You cancel each other out. That's all a voltage is this the push that moves everything around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. So this is like stop it. That leads up into a wire.
It basically means they each cancel each other out and they're both kind of useless. They're just there to be there. And if you ever really kind of want to play with this is actually a lot of fun because I can set things on. You can set things on fire without doing it in reality. Since they're of equal value, I don't know that one has more advantage over the other. No. Hmm. One's not really conquering the other. They're all. I have a hard time explaining this because the way I'm trying to think of a different way I can say it. Most examples don't always translate very well sometimes. Well, the whole thing is you don't just have batteries, you have things like DC power supplies, like these. And the whole point of it is that, it's not just about batteries, it's about a power source. So if you have two power sources and you need, or three power sources and you need to negate one for some reason, this is how you would negate two of them. So say you need more current but less voltage. There's certain ways you can set these up to do that, or more voltage than current. If you need to bring yourself more voltage, all you would have to do is have all three of these facing the same way, and you've got 27 volts just sitting there. Exactly. Exactly. What kind of a voltage are you trying to achieve? Or how much current do you need? If I was to set these in, let's see, it'd probably help if I was actually working with this. Okay. Let's say instead of series, I put these guys in parallel. Put this on either side. I still get 9 volts, but what I'm looking at is more current. I should be looking at more current. Let me put it across the resistor. That'll be an easier way to see it. So 9 volts, because I've got both of these set to 9 volts. So same voltage, but I should be coming up. If I get rid of one of these, I should have dropped the current. Or not. Okay. Let's pump him up to 100. Trying to get this thing to do what I want. It's just not working for me tonight. Okay. Yeah, and I created 2 fires. I created a short circuit with one. I'm going to back you off. So this is why this is kind of fun to play with sometimes. So you can literally set it up however you want. But with just that one battery at 9 volts, 100 ohms, I get 0.09 amps or 90 milliamps. The only bad thing about this is it doesn't do like smaller amperage. But as we're moving through this, you can actually go in and it's got fuses, it's got light bulbs, it's got bigger batteries that put out more power, bigger resistors, switches, and everything else. So this is actually a really good little setup. It's phet.colorado.edu, and it's a circuit construction kit. Easiest way to find it is if you go to Google. Look for a construction kit virtual lab, and it's like the one that comes up first. Quite literally. So it's a great thing to play with and kind of work with some of the different concepts and circuits we're going to be playing with. So one of the things you can actually see with something like this, I'll go ahead and reset all this. So just to kind of give you all a different example of a series circuit. Like I said, this is always kind of fun. That's why I like this particular setup, is because it really does a good job. And one of the things it shows is, if you notice, it's showing you electron flow, or how the electrons are moving. You can also tell it you want to do a conventional flow, which means that it's the way we think it moves, not so much the way it actually moves. So let me put this in the switch, wire, and we'll put in a couple of voltage sources in a series aiding pattern. All right, so this is a series circuit. So each of these is set to 10 ohms. I'm going to go ahead and set these up to 50 volts each. And that just moves the electrons around it a little bit faster so you can actually see it doing something. Okay, so this is a closed actual circuit. Now, as you can see, the electron flow is moving fairly steadily because we've got 250 amps, I'm sorry, 2.50 amps, 2.5 amps. What you can see is, by looking at this circuit this way, we can see with the ammeter, without having to actually put an ammeter in, the current is constant throughout everything, right? Why? Because the current only has one path to flow. I'm going to pull a voltmeter. And since all of these are the same size resistor, when I put my voltmeter to it, I should get the same voltage no matter where I stick this. "25 volts at each one." All right, so if I take instead this one resistor and I take it up to, we'll say, 20 ohms. And we'll take this one right here up to, we'll say, 30. What are you noticing as I do this about the overall current in the system? I'm going to take this guy up to, we'll say, 40. Just took him down to 0. Okay, 40-ish. There we go. So what did you see happen to the current each time? We started off with 2.5 amps. We've now dropped to 1 amp. Why? Because my resistance increased. But because I increased it in a series circuit, it decreased through the whole circuit. Does that make sense? You kind of see what I'm talking about? My voltage is going to be different at each resistor. Why? I did not change my overall voltage. I've still got 50 volts here and 50 volts here. I've got a total of 100 volts being spread through this whole system. Right? This one right here at 20 ohms is pulling 20 volts. If I go to my next one, the one I left at 10 ohms, he's got 10 volts. I take this guy and put him over here. This guy's 30 ohms, 30 volts. And then you've got 40 ohms and 40 volts. Does that make sense? I just figure this is a really nice way of showing this without getting into actual circuits. I can put the values up. So the great thing about one of these circuits is, let's say my 10 ohms completely shorts out. In any other circuit type, a short like that would mean total devastation for everything else. All it really means to these guys is that if you watch, my voltage went from 40 volts to 44.44 volts. If I look at my 30 ohm resistor, it went up as well to 33.33. So in other words, all the voltage that was taken by that 10 ohms is spread through the other resistors. Does that make sense? Because this guy no longer exists, he shorted out, he's basically not there anymore. We were able to create a different type of circuit. The great thing is it means that these guys tend to be a little bit more stable with shorts. If you ever see across a short with a voltmeter, it should read very little to no voltage, by the way. If I read across, let's say, my switch, if I read across an open switch, I find all my voltage there. Why? Because they're waiting for that bridge to close and then it gets to go across, right? It has no resistance. There is a path. If it shorts out, there's still a path. Basically, how to say this? Basically, it's like you have no speed limit there. Okay? So let's say top out speed is 100 miles an hour. Okay? But at resistor 1, you're only allowed to go 20. At this resistor up here, you have the ability to go 30 and 40 here. But here, you only could go 10. Now you can open it up to a full 100 and go however fast you want. Okay? That's a short. A short basically means that any resistance is burned away. Think if a dam gave way. All the water that's held back by that dam just goes through, but that doesn't change the overall push of that changes the overall push of the river, but the water that replaces behind the dam is still the same current. Does that make sense? Everybody else has to do more work because this thing's gone, but even with it gone, it's still part of the system. The only way that you would not have something if you had a short is if it burned into an open. Does that make sense? Yeah, just be like opening a switch. It just open up the circuit because it can't take it anymore. And that could be a best case, worst case scenario, because the best case would be that all electricity stops and it can't jump the gap if it burns it out completely. Worst case scenario is that you still have enough voltage and current trying to run through that gap that opens, that your whole everything starts arcing and catching fire. That's the worst case scenario. So when it comes to a short, essentially essentially, it just means that there's no resistance. Okay? You're lacking a lot of resistance. If it comes to an open, you've got a lot of resistance somewhere. You can't jump the gap. Does that make sense? More or less? Now, the only thing this thing does not do is it does not calculate power for you. It'd be really great if it did, but it doesn't. But like I said, the best thing about it is that it does show you in a lot of different ways how everything actually works. And again, you have electron flow, which is how it actually works, where it flows from negative to positive. This is conventional flow. This is how we tend to think it works, right? When we put a battery in, well, it must be going from positive to negative. I don't know why we think it that way. I think it's just more comfortable for us to think of it that way. But that's not how it works. You're not moving you're not moving protons, you're moving electrons. You're moving something with a negative charge. So where's it got to go? It's got to go around to the positive side, not the negative side. So I just kind of wanted to show you all this just because as we go through the next several types of circuits, this circuit builder is a great way to demonstrate it and to work some of the problems that you're going to be given. And it's a great way to just kind of visualize how things actually are going to be running and working. Does that make sense? I definitely recommend it. If nothing else, you can also go down here to where, let's see, let me do it. Yeah, here it is. You can go to where it just does symbols. You can kind of see how the symbols work out for all this. So you have the symbol for a switch. Get rid of the show current and values. This is how a basic circuit's drawn. And you can even go again, kind of look at how the voltage would be moving in this circuit. The voltage works in mysterious ways. And you can't see what you're actually looking at. But it does make things a little bit different. All right, so when we're talking about series aiding versus series opposing, it might be that you only have two voltage sources, but they are uneven voltage sources, and you don't need as much voltage as either of them provides. In this case, you had, let's say, a 25 and a 15, but you only need 10. This is a way to get down to only 10 volts. Otherwise, if you need more voltage, you can do a series aiding versus series opposing. And you can get up to, in this case, 75 volts. Okay. All right, so I